Hi, welcome to the 2021 Asian Heritage Month. My name is Justin Poi, and you are watching the ImaginASIAN broadcast. This is the special series of interviews that I'm doing this month, highlighting very special Asian Canadians that have broken through barriers and have done something incredible with their life. They have essentially broken the stereotypes and all of the things that we normally associated with being norms of Asian Canadian careers. These are people that have gone out and forged their own path, and they've certainly become admirable in our community and in Canada as a whole. My interview today is with Deputy Police Chief Peter Yuen. Now, Peter is a classic example of somebody who just decided to forge his own path. He knew the pressures that were put on him by his parents, but he decided he was going to do his own thing and make his own mark, and make his mark he did. The whole Chinese Canadian community is extremely proud of Peter and what he has accomplished and how far he has moved up the ranks and helped to transform the Toronto Police Force, and also how the Toronto Police Force are perceived and how they communicate and integrate with the Chinese Canadian community. So let's listen to that extremely enlightening interview now. Hi, Peter. Thank you very much for doing this interview today.
Pleasure, Justin. Important conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, and welcome to Asian Heritage Month. So first of all, actually, people have asked me this question about you. What made you aspire to go into the field that you're in? I mean, what would it have been was it from your childhood, or was it something that in your young adult life that drove you in that direction? How did you decide to choose this path?
Well, you know what, Justin, I like every immigrant family. I came here, our parents came here to give us a better life, and we came with nothing, and we often hear these stories. Parents working 12 hours, 14 hours, and I was the oldest of the family. I looked after my younger brother and sister, and we always excelled in school, and high school, university. But it was during the second year of university when it started. I always talk about junior life journey through life. You have many defining moments, and I think that was my first defining moment. It was a rebellious moment, actually, because my dad, as we talked prior to this recording. Immigrant family, whether you're South Asian, East Asian, or even East European, they want our kids to their kids to be engineers, doctors, lawyers, your bank managers. Well, you know what? There are only so many of those positions to go around. So I remember graduating from high school with extremely good marks, and because a typical Asian kid, I wanted to pursue more of a history or journalism type of career. And I think you will kind of guess my parents' reaction. It was absolutely not. And so reluctantly, I went to engineering school. But after 2 years, I had this, what I call defining moment. And I said, no, this is not for me. You look at, why should we be put into a box and typecast for certain roles? And at that time, I walked past a recruiting booth on Yonge Street, and they said they're looking for police officers. I had no expectations. I didn't know if I was going to be selected. So I joined. And I joined without telling my parents until I got accepted. And that's when, I think it wasn't well received. But having said that, I explained to my parents, education is important. And I did promise them I will complete my university one day. And I did. I have. So that is for them to, it's a personal accomplishment, but that's how I became a police officer. So I wasn't your typical young person growing up. I said, I want to be a police officer to save the city, to save lives. I wasn't drawn into these TV dramas as I'm going to be the superhero. So that's how I became a police officer. And that was 33 years ago. And I'm still here, and I'm enjoying what I do. And I certainly have seen a lot of things have changed in the city of Toronto and the Toronto Police Service.
Now, during that journey, you talk about defining moments. There must have been a number of defining moments in your career, in your law enforcement career. Can you think of a defining moment that might have related to, you know, whether you felt that being Asian played a factor in either getting that position or not getting that role?
Well, I really, when I first started and I was assigned to 42 Division, you know, for City of Toronto, that is in the Scarborough area in the late 80s. That's when I guess the explosion of Asian Hong Kong immigrants. And Scarborough was a sought after neighborhood. And it was very known to me that the reason I was hired and I was stationed at 42 Division in Scarborough was because my background, my ethnicity, my cultural competence, my language capacity. And I have to tell you, it was, you know, I grew up here, so I'm used to the ribbings and the racism. It's, you know, let's be honest. You know, I face racism, as we all have, as people of color. And so when I went to 42 Division, it was an eye opener, but it wasn't. You know, you got to put in context. In the late 1980s, the station had over 200 police officers. I was the only racialized person. The whole station was male white officers. And I learned early from that day, the language they use, the subtlety they exhibit, some of the things that they believe is a aggression. They didn't microaggression back then. That wasn't even a concept. They had no understand what that was. They thought they were making fun of you. They thought they wanted to see how thick your skin was. And I knew one thing early is to belong. If you want to belong, then you get along. But having said that, I said to myself, this will change. I will change this. You don't need to get along because to belong. Okay. So I make sure that was an edge in my mind and say, right now I can't change this, but I will change it. And I will change it for the betterment of the Toronto Police Service and for the City of Toronto. So certainly the first few years was extremely difficult, but I like to give credit to my parents and to our ancestors, to our forefathers, that with resilience, that was the word. You get through it. You let your heart work speak for itself. Deed speaks. You know what? It is not fair. As a person of color, you have to work doubly hard to impress your bosses. But I speak to my friends, I speak to my colleagues, and we all share the same journey. So I wasn't, something special, someone special. So, those are the moments that. But I said to myself, and also back then when I joined, Justin, there were only 3 or 4 Chinese officers, and there weren't a lot of role models for me to go to seek guidance. And I said to myself, one day I will be that older person.
Yeah.
I want to be that role model. Yeah. If people want to speak with me, I will have all the time, and make sure that I pass on some of my knowledge, what I have seen. And if I can help someone, great.
Now, do you feel that, I mean, obviously you've seen the evolution of change. Do you feel that do you feel that change is happening at the speed you expected, or is it happening slower, faster? How do you feel that change happening? Because I've noticed, I mean, there are a lot more Asian police officers. And I mean, do you feel that change is happening at the speed you expected?
Well, you know what? There's never going to be the right answer for that. Change is, some people want change to be an evolutionary process. Some wants to be a revolutionary process. One thing I do say to you, and people are asking me the last several weeks because of the current situation with our pandemic and the Asian hate crime on the rise. Peter, how you manage that? And I look at them and say, why are you asking me that now? You should have asked me that about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because these things existed 20 and 30 years ago. So is this the flavor of the day you're asking? Are you asking because you just became aware Asian hate or racism exists in our society? So if you look at that spectrum, way too slow. Yep. People have no understanding. But then you look at some of our legislations, some of the context, and some of the hiring practices, not only for the Toronto Police Service, but for private and public sectors, they're moving along. Are we there? Not, definitely not. And yes, people are being trained on anti-racism, respectful workplaces. I like to see a little bit more effort put into that, because at the end of the day, we're training human minds, and it's not that easy to influence human minds, because it doesn't matter what part of the world we go to, we see racism, we see hate. So these are ingrained into our minds, and so this is something that will take a long time to rebuild, to get to a better we say end state. But so it depends on what spectrum you look at. Some areas we have moved quite well, some maybe not.
So, I mean, yeah, you talk about Asian hate, like sort of this new flavor of the day. So, I mean, COVID-19 pandemic, it saw sort of that was a catalyst for it, and it clearly defies any logic or intelligent rationalization. But I'm curious how law enforcement, specifically your department, how they perceive or try to understand this phenomenon. Do they see it as something new, or like, do you guys talk about it as a new wave of things that are happening, or is it just part of the course right now?
Well, just hate crime has been with us since I joined the job, since I became a police officer 30 some odd years ago, and it was before that. But certainly it has been magnified in certain, let's talk about hate in general. We have seen hate crimes directed towards the Jewish community. This has been ongoing for many, many years. The Black community, the Muslim community. Yes, Asian hate was not didn't take center stage because of COVID, because of other, world issues has elevated. And also social media, also people talking about, because people are saying, no, we're not standing up for this. We're standing up for this. So they're speaking up. So we see an increase in reporting of Asian hate. But hate crime has been something that we've been very, very aware of as a police service across this country. And we have put more dedication, more resources to fight these type of activities. Someone asked me, how do you prevent hate? I said, well, it's hard to prevent hate. It's easier to prevent your house being broken into, your car being broken into, or scammed over the phone. It's hard to prevent hate. It's a human condition where we can, number one is education, making sure people understand that there's no tolerance for this, and the Toronto Police Service or any other police services will do everything we can to investigate it fully, providing that you report that to us. Number two is through education. So the two components has to be alive, well, and continuous conversations. Because people, one of the things that Justin I see, during, let's talk about the Asian hate specifically, is people do not have understanding what is racism and what is hate crime. Right. Racism, someone calling you a name, that's racism. That's not a law. That's not a criminal code offense in Canada. It's the person's ethics, the person's integrity, and the person's upbringing. But if hate crime is something different, where a actual physical assault, damaging your property associated to your heritage, that's a hate crime. So we're working very hard and try to educate the public and do it. If you look at our latest news release, we want to make sure. In the past, we're a little bit more covert. Now we're more overt. What that means is this: anytime we arrest people for hate crime, we're making sure there'll be a press release, making sure the public understand that we're working with them in partnership and apprehending these offenders.
And how much, I guess, if it's a percentage or a ratio, how much time does the police force spend in proactive activities like education and things versus just reactive?
Wow, that's a good question, and we do have liaison officers in all the different communities, such as a Jewish community, such as the Muslim, and similarly in the Chinese community. And I can tell you, these liaison officers, they do reach out quite on a regular basis. Our mindset is this: if you want a session, just call us. We'll be there. Having said that, for the enforcement piece or the investigative piece, it depends on how willing is the public to report these crimes. So the more you report it, the more effort we put in, because this is not, I said it earlier, this is not something that we can prevent, and it's not something we can do proactively. So we stress the importance of reporting hate crime to the Toronto Police Service. And we can address, because if you don't report, the assumption will be, okay, everything is great. But the more reporting, that means that you're forcing us. I lack a better word. You're giving us the information, so for us to focus our efforts and our resources into certain areas. But if we don't hear it, we have so many priorities in a large city such as Toronto. But if you don't tell us, we would assume everything's good. Right. So that's why the reporting is really are really important.
Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, a lot of young Asians right now, they see, because of the media, the media, they love the flavor of the week. So they're really reporting on Asian hate now and whatnot. And, there's a lot of young Asians out there that it's demoralizing. What would you say to them if they feel a little bit, like the cards are stacked against them right now?
Well, I'm always an individual who looks at turn everything into an opportunity. Turn this into something that's better than the way you found it. So now we're having a crisis. So ask yourself, how can I turn this into a positive moving forward only for yourself, for the community, or for the greater city? So speak up. Mm-hmm. But before you speak up, have the knowledge. And I always say to our younger generation, if you cannot move forward if you don't know your past. But never let your past define who you are. Built on the past that you found. So if you don't know the history of Chinese Canadians in Canada, get to know us. Get to know our forefathers. Justin, I'll say this to you. About 5 years ago, I finally had a chance to go to Vancouver. And I said to my family, I want to go visit the last spike. A lot of people, I speak to younger generations, different young youth groups that I speak with. I said, go visit last spike. If you don't know your past, you can't plan for your future, and you can't address the present. Yeah. I stood there. Yeah. It was surreal.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
I closed my eyes and said, these are our forefathers that came here looking for an opportunity. But when the completion of this great project to connect our country from east to west, that picture, not a single Chinese person was in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that project was completed, they were displaced into various cities in Canada. I spoke to some of our younger Asian officers. I said, do you not know, even in the early 1900s, Beiyang University was the only Chinatown, consists of 2 blocks. And they had signs outside by those boundaries. Chinese and dogs not allowed. Remember that. Don't remember what they went through. Do not have a hatred. Do not be spiteful. Remember the lessons that they taught us. It's called perseverance and resilience. And now, as a young Asian, you cannot, if they can do it, one of the things that should be atop of your mind is, I can do it. Don't make excuses for yourself. Don't make excuses because I am female, I'm Black, I'm Chinese, and my skin color. You have to get past that. If every time you fail, you say, because I fail, because I am racialized, then you're living in the past. Remember the lessons our forefathers taught us. And that's how you plot for the future. But you have to understand where we came from before we can go to a new place. That's what I tell our young folks. And I always remind myself, the hardship that I face today, nothing compared to the hardship our forefathers faced. They paved the way. We use that term all the time with all racialized communities, the trailblazers. They were the trailblazers, but not a single one of us, Justin, you and I, remember their names. They were nameless, but that's more important. So don't do things because you want fame or glory. Do things because you want to do it. But the first thing is you have to get past, you fail. is because you did not give your best effort. You failed. It's not because you're Asian or you're racialized. Don't use that as your safety valve.
Yeah, you know, we've got a great program at U of T now, Chinese Canadian Studies, and it's interesting how many Chinese Canadians actually don't really know much about our history. Yeah. Actually, one of my interviews next week is going to be with Ann Tate, the producer of Iron Road.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great film. So, you know, you talked about when you were younger, you vowed to be a mentor when you were older. Have you had some of those satisfying mentorship experiences in your career? You must have had quite a few of those.
Yeah, you know what? Somewhat, you know, Justin, as you age, I hope gracefully. I have aged. So, you know, one of the things that I don't reach out to people and say, "I am your mentor. Come see me." I believe if you have to advertise yourself, you have to broadcast, then you're not who you are. So I've been very humble and fortunate to have a group. You know, whether it's community members or Toronto Police Service members, whether they're Asians or non-Asians, they come to me and said, you know, Deputy Peter, can we have a chat? Can you share some of your thoughts, your experiences with us? So they come to me. So I it's very humbling and very grateful because maybe they've seen something in me that they want to learn, that we want to share. And I always say this: when I speak with any groups, I equally learn a lot from them. It's not a one way. It's a mutual transaction. I use the term. We learn from each other, and it's always great to speak. And if I can pass on some of my life experiences, my live experiences, and things to do or what not to do, that's great. I don't ask for feedback. I let them go forge their own journey, future. But if I've been able to give them some of my wisdoms, because some of the mistakes that I have made, then that'll be a great thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you feel? I mean, I've talked to a lot of politicians about this. You know, when they come into office and they campaigned because they know their community very well. And, you know, for example, if it's an ethnic community, you know, I know a lot of Chinese politicians and South Asian politicians, they get elected because they know their constituency. When they get elected and they're in office, they are now representing, for example, if they're federal, they're representing the whole country, but they also feel the need to represent their own constituency. In the position that you're in, how do you balance that? Being, you know, you're a deputy chief. I mean, your role and responsibilities are far and wide. How do you balance that between I am a police deputy and I'm a Chinese police deputy?
Well, that's a great question. Because of my background, you know, the Toronto Chinese community certainly believe I'm one of their own. And they believe that they should have more quote unquote airtime with me. So it's a very delicate balance, very delicate. You know, if they invite me to, and Justin, I think it will share a similar, you know, during Chinese New Year, during some of the significant events in the Chinese calendar. If I'm not there, they're offended. Like, so I would get, like, you know, I would, you know, during the month, you know, right now COVID obviously has slowed down, but during Chinese New Year, I would look at my calendars and I would just, wow, I will say it's just nonstop. Yeah. But you have to balance that. But I also say this, I say this, you're absolutely right. I have a job to do, and I have a duty to represent all communities. So I do make time to meet with all of them, and I'm very, very clear to say I'm here to meet with all communities. Everybody will have equal access, because this is where this country, our principle and our foundation was built, is to be inclusive, not to be exclusive. Yes, I'm one of your favorite sons, if you want to call it, but I would never forget my roots. I would never forget my roots. But I also encourage the Chinese community to interact, to get out of their own shell, to interact with exploring other community, other culture, and other thoughts, so that we can fully be an inclusive community. It is, you know, Justin, there's no simple answer. It's a very balanced, delicate balancing act. And I do the best I can. You know, I don't know what other politicians can tell you what they do, but you certainly have to, you know, you're never going to forget your roots. And I would never forget, where I came from. I know the Chinese community has been very proud of me, even though I don't know a lot of them. Justin, you walk around, and I'll tell you, I'm like anyone else. I go to the supermarket, and just recently, 2 weeks ago, I'm wearing a mask. An older couple says, "Are you not Peter Yuen, the police officer?" I said, "Yes, I am." And I didn't know what they wanted. They go, "I can't believe the deputy's shopping for grocery." So sometimes they look at us as like, we're not some superheroes. We're human beings. When I take off this uniform, I'm part of you. I'm part of the community. So I kind of find it sometimes funny. Sometimes I didn't know how to respond. And I think I asked them, "So what's on sale today?" Because I don't shop that much. What kind of vegetables? So you try to start a conversation. So you want to be who you are, because I know the community is extremely proud of what I have done. And I thank them for that. And I know, even though we don't have a vote, they silently, they sit behind it. They're out there, and they're supporting, and they're confirming, agreeing to what I'm doing in representing Chinese community. So I'm grateful for that. And I'll never forget those roots. But I also want to be as balanced as possible. So yes, there's a little favoritism. Yeah. Chinese New Year, I do go to all the events, even though how tired I am. But I do go to all the events. But one of the things that I preach is being inclusive. Everybody should get to know each community. Venture out of your comfort zone, of your bubble, and go see the rest of the world. Because only with that, you can open up your minds. Just like I tell the young, the younger generation, open up your minds. Learn as much as you can. So I hope I answer your question, but it was a very difficult question.
Well, Peter. I mean, it's a question that we all think, and every individual in the Chinese community, for example, feels the same thing. Like, one clear example is when the Olympics are on in Beijing, for example. There's almost like this torn identity. Well, I'm a Chinese Canadian. Am I rooting for Canada? Am I rooting for China? Am I, and it's these kind of things, they come into our heads, and Canada is a very unique country that way, because while we become Canadian, we're encouraged to still appreciate all of our own individual cultures and our own differences. But thank you very much for your time, Peter. We're all very proud of you, and you're a great example and a role model for young Asians in Canada. And thank you very much for doing this for Asian Heritage Month, and great talking to you.
It's a pleasure, Justin. Stay well. There are a whole host of things that the Chinese community or Asian community can accomplish working together. So I look for greater things from our future generations. So thank you for the time, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Peter. Thank you. Take care. Okay, and we'll see you soon. Hi. Thank you very much for watching the ImaginASIAN broadcast for the 2021 Virtual Asian Heritage Month events. My name is Justin Poi, and I hope to see you next time.